Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. South Korea has begun dismantling its border loudspeakers aimed at North Korea just 54 days after halting the propaganda broadcast that once echoed across the DMZ. Now, these devices, used for psychological operations and sharp criticism of the North Korean regime, are being removed, and it's a clear symbolic gesture from Seoul, part of a broader pattern of de-escalation efforts, even as Pyongyang remains unresponsive. Now, meanwhile, Washington and Seoul are reportedly delaying segments of their joint military drills, officially due to the heat. But the timing does raise questions on whether these moves are part of a quietly coordinated effort to reopen diplomatic space with the North, or a one-sided concession. For a closer look into the situation, we connect to Park Won-gun, professor of North Korea Studies at Ewha Women's University. Welcome to the program, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
So, Professor Park, like I've said, South Korea began dismantling its border loudspeakers yesterday, and Seoul's defense ministry framed this as a practical move to de-escalate tensions. Do you think this kind of preemptive action could help open the door to restoring mutual trust between the two Koreas?
Well, under the Lee Jae-myung government, South Korea took several preemptive steps to reduce the tensions and improve relations with the North. They controlled the leaflet drops and stopped and removed the loudspeakers you just mentioned, and fully approved the civilian contacts with the North, and even considering the return of long-term unconverted prisoners. Especially stopping the loudspeaker showed the government's commitment to not sending information into North Korea, the thing North Korea reacts to most strongly. Probably many of you still remember that back in the year 2015, so-called bounding mine incident. At the time, we have a couple of casualties by the North Koreans mine. So that at the time, then the President Park Geun-hye decided to resume the loudspeaker, and finally, at the final moment, North Korea is back down, and they apologized the bounding mine incident. That was for the first time since the Korean War, North Korea has apologized to South Korean government and South Korean people. So it means that North Korea has such a sensitivity of the entering information to the North. So taking down the loudspeakers was like a symbol of an irreversible step by the Lee Jae-myung government. However, throughout this whole process, North Korea didn't reach out or respond directly to the South Korean government. They also stopped their broadcast and even stopped sending trash balloons. We have many trash balloons last year, but they didn't try to communicate with South Korea. One of the other examples is that the 6 North Korean people who fled to South Korea finally back to the North Korea the last month, and 2 of them were in South Korea in March this year. And then since March, South Korean government, both Yoon Suk-yeol government and Lee Jae-myung government, tried to reach North Korean government in order to send back the North Korean people, but they haven't responded at all. So this is one of the examples that North Korea has totally blocked any kind of a communication with South Korea. In December 2023, at their 8th Central Committee of 9th Plenary Session, North Korea officially declared that it now sees South Korea as hostile, separate country. They called this is a major policy decision and a fundamental shift their direction. So no matter how much power is concentrated in one person there, the North Korea, without this major line change or major policy change from the North, is very unlikely North Korea will have any kind of a contact with South Korea so far.
Right. So we are having these gestures, and like you've said, North Korea also stopped sending trash balloons. But despite these kinds of gestures, it seems as though Pyongyang seems kind of indifferent and kind of silent regarding this situation. So, Professor Park, at this point, we wonder, for this current strategy of the Lee Jae-myung administration to work, what do you think more could be done? Or do you think real progress could depend on a policy shift within the North Korea itself?
Yes, I already mentioned that is unfortunately depend on the North Korea's policy shift because North Korea recently made its stance on the South Korea crystal clear through this statement by Kim Yo-jong. Of course, she is the Kim Jong's sister. And that was the July 28th that Kim Yo-jong issued the statement toward South Korea, and 29th, and another statement to United States. And as many of you know that Kim Yo-jong usually speaks on behalf of her brother, of course, Kim Jong-un, especially when it comes to messages aimed at South Korea or United States. Just looking at the title of this statement tells us a lot about the North Korea's current thinking. The title was North-South relations have completely moved beyond the idea of being the same people. They have finally decided to consider South Korea is not the one nation or one people. And it's really a big shift. North Korea didn't refer to South Korea as South Joseon as they used. They called them as North Joseon and they called South Korea as South Joseon. Instead, they used the full name Republic of Korea, 대한민국, which shows they now treat the South as a completely separate state. They even use a new term, DPRK-RK relations, not inter-Korean relations. And then they went a step further. North Korea described itself as the Kim Il-sung nation while calling the South Korea Republic of Korea tribe. So totally different the meaning. That's a clear rejection of the idea that we are one people or brothers. Even North Korea officially proclaimed that they are simply giving up the reunification effort at all. So based on that, North Korea now says it will not engage with South Korea, no matter which political party is in power, liberal or conservative. In her Kim Yo-jong's statement, she said that whether they claim to be democratic or they wear the mask of the conservatives, South Korea will never be a partner for reconciliation or cooperation. This echoes what Kim Jong-un said back in December 2023 at the 8th Central Committee's 9th plenary meeting. He said exactly the same thing. He said that South Korea's aim to collapse the North system is the same, no matter if they say they are the democratic or conservative. So Kim Yo-jong also made clear that we, North Korea, have no interest in what policies come out of Seoul or what proposal they make. We will not sit down with them and then we have nothing to discuss. It's a very strong message to total rejection to any kind of a meaningful relationship with South Korea. So unless North Korea walks back or adjusts this too hostile state approach, we don't see any realistic way to break the current stalemate in inter-Korean relations. And just to make their point even clearer, North Korea followed the very next day on July 29th with a statement toward the United States. In that one, they completely exclude South Korea from the picture, but left a small door open for the talks with Washington, though with some conditions.
Right, so we will really have to see what could bring Pyongyang back to the table when negotiating with the Trump administration as well. Now, in the meantime, so speaking of America, both sides are quietly coordinating an August summit following a recent trade deal, South Korea and the U.S. And notably, defense cost sharing was left out of the agreement. Do you expect this to take center stage when the two presidents meet? And if it does, what do you think South Korea, in what way do you think South Korea should respond to that?
Well, so there are several agendas still. We have to, South Korea and United States have to talk about the tariff is one of them too. We haven't cleared out some of the important items of the tariff. And especially South Korea hasn't mentioned about how much money we are going to spend to buy American goods because European Union and Japan and they promised to buy these tremendous amount of U.S. goods. So that part and very high possibility talk between United States and South Korea. But at the same time, as you just mentioned, there are good chance that President Trump may bring up the issue of South Korea's paying more for defense during the upcoming summit. Even during the summit preparation, we already got into this preparation process. Washington probably, and very high, strong possibility that raised both Seoul's position on countering China and the cost-sharing issue as key agenda items. Now, here is the problem. The South Korea already signed the 12th Special Measure Agreement, also known as SMA, under the Biden administration, and is set to take effect starting next year. That agreement has already been approved by South Korea's National Assembly. So from our Seoul's point of view, the position is clear. We can't and we will not renegotiate of this SMA. But as we saw in tariff talks, Trump does not respect the previous agreements. He even ignored the ROK-US FTA, free trade agreement. So we cannot rule out the possibility that he might also try to override the existing SMA. What could be even more challenging for South Korea is if Trump demanded that we pay for the joint military exercise and the deployment of the U.S. strategic asset. Those costs are not part of SMA. Just to clarify, the SMA only covers three things: salary of the Korean workers on U.S. bases, logistics support, and military construction. That's it. So joint drills and strategic asset deployment, those come with a massive price tag. And if Trump insists that South Korea foot the bill, that would put us in a very tough position. In fact, he made a similar demand during his first term. He might even go so far as to scale back or cancel the exercise or asset deployment if South Korea doesn't pay up. That would weaken our readiness against North Korean threats. I personally clearly remember that back in 2018 after Singapore summit, when Trump has a press briefing, he suddenly mentioned about the scale back and halt of joint military exercise. At the time, nobody knows his statement before. Even the Jim Mattis, the defense secretary of the United States, he had no idea at all. So these kind of things can happen. So here is my opinion. This is my suggestion. I think South Korea should renegotiate the 12th SMA and offer to pay an additional 1.5 trillion won, double the current amount. Of course, it's a huge amount of money, but that way South Korea could be covering 100% of the cost of stationing U.S. troops in Korea. In return, the U.S. should continue to cover the cost of strategic asset deployment and joint military exercise, just like it used to. Also, we could use this for the tariff negotiation, using the increased defense spending as leverage to lower the cost of buying the U.S. goods.
Mm-hmm. So we suggest a doubled amount of the current and ask for the current situation to be maintained in the meantime, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for your opinion on that. Now, Professor Park, let's also touch upon the North Korea front. North Korea has floated the idea of a dialogue with Washington themselves, but only if it says its status as a nuclear weapon state is acknowledged. Do you expect the upcoming summit to address prospects for a U.S.-North Korea talks or denuclearization as well?
Well, if we look at the Kim Mok-yeon's statement from the 29th, the last month, North Korea seems to be leaving the door open for the possible summit with the United States. I just mentioned that, but only under the certain condition. North Korea is demanding that ROK-US joint military drills and strategic asset deployment stop. And instead of talking about denuclearization, they are now pushing for the nuclear arms reduction talks. The White House has responded by saying that President Trump remains open to communicating with the Chairman Kim as long as it's aimed at ending North Korea's nuclear program completely. That's a very clear message. The United States is not interested in talks based on the North Korea's terms or agenda. Definitely, the United States wanted to talk about the denuclearization. So now what really matters going forward is the language used in the joint statement after ROK-US summit. I think that United States will wanted to include the phase complete denuclearization of North Korea, but South Korean government might try to leave it out or water it down a bit. We know that Lee Jae-myung's government definitely wanted to have resumed any kind of relationship with North Korea, so they do not provoke North Korea at all by saying denuclearization, because denuclearization is a very sensitive word for the North Korea. But since after inauguration of Trump and the United States government in their official document, they keep mentioning about denuclearization of North Korea, including the last February the summit between United States and Japan, and that month or so we have a trilateral summit among the trilateral foreign secretary summit among South Korea, Japan, and United States, and also Quad and summit. More of them are talking about denuclearization of North Korea. So what's important to remember is that neither Seoul or North Washington has laid out an official North Korean policy yet. So from now on, I think two sides, South Korea and United States, really need to coordinate closely and come up with a unified message when it comes to dealing with Pyongyang. And in my view, that message must include a clear commitment to North Korea's complete denuclearization. At the same time, it should also express a willingness to engage in dialogue. Unfortunately, for South Korean government, it doesn't matter whether it's a liberal or conservative government. Conservative governments always emphasize the deterrence of the North Korea, and also deterrence of the North Korea's nuclear threat. In different front, the liberals, progressive, always talk about engagement. So my suggestion is that we have to have both deterrence and engagement in the same phase. So that's the only way or the effective way to dealing with North Korea.
So the words that will come out of the ROK U.S. summit will be very, very crucial in determining the direction moving forward. Now, let's also talk about the deepening Russia-North Korea partnership, which is very concerning. In latest data by Ukrainian intelligence, it says up to 30,000 North Korean troops are now inside a Russian territory. Professor, from your view, how realistic is the possibility of further deployments to Russia?
I think there's news, you just mentioned the Ukraine intelligence saying that North Korea might send over 30,000 more troops to Russia in the coming months. And they even said that there would be a possibility to have joint military drills with Russia and Belarus and the North Korea during the so-called ZEPET 2025 exercise. The report specifically raised concern that this large portion of this additional North Korean force could be involved in those exercises. But in my view, the number 30,000 figures sounds pretty exaggerated. I don't think North Korea will send actual combat troops. In fact, last month on July 17th, Sergei Shoigu, the Secretary of Russia's Security Council, visited Pyongyang and said North Korea had agreed to send around 6,000 personnel, mainly engineers and military construction units, not the frontline soldiers. What really matters here is that North Korea and Russia are laying the groundwork for long-term cooperation, even after war ends. If North Korea is sending engineers and workers for post-war reconstructions and not combat troops, then I believe that this kind of cooperation between the two countries is likely to continue for a while. But still, I think that is some limitation between Russia and North Korea's cooperation because, first of all, historically, those two countries would not trust each other. Even preparation of the Korean War back in 1950s, they were not trusting with each other. And second, still, I think the Russians' invasion to Ukraine is a very specific incident to bringing these two countries together. In other words, if the Russia and Ukraine war ended, then those cooperation as we are seeing right now, I don't think it can maintain in that level. And finally, the Russia and United States relations are also very important. If Trump is successfully normalized relations with Russia, then Russia have a little bit difficult, have some difficulty to maintain this kind of cooperation with North Korea.
So it seems all signs point to a rapidly shifting diplomatic landscape around North Korea, and we will be able to make sure that we'll keep close tabs on the upcoming developments as well. But as for now, we'll have to conclude our discussion at this point. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight, Professor Park. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.